when you first have your baby, that's a beautiful thing. They bring that baby in and you think, it's like something that was a gift from God.
Is that your neighbor's dog?
They had 2 police dogs, and Mrs. Hammond said to me, don't go near the fence because you can't trust those dogs. She was a nice white lady. She was married to a colored man.
Oh yeah? So that had to be a rarity.
That was a rarity then, but there was half colored on the street and half white. And the colored were just as nice as the white until we lived there a while, and when Nancy was a baby, then it started to get trashed on Ferry Street. If you went to a store, guys stood on the corner and whistled or did all that stuff. Well, even the white ones did, and they were nice boys. The Waterman boys. And the oldest Waterman boy was near my age. It was kind of flattering, but I was a married woman and I wasn't supposed to be paying attention. How about calling me up sometime or something like that? And I just ignored it. But it felt good.
Mom is definitely a giver. Not too good on receiving, but she is a good giver. And always fair. She told us at Christmas time she would get Christmas presents, and it had to be exactly to the penny for each one of us, the same. She'd always say, well, now somebody might have gotten more presents because theirs cost less, or I got them on sale. But everybody got exactly the same. If she would get down to near Christmas and somebody wasn't exactly equal, she would buy something little to stick in the stocking or something. She did treat us differently because of the different characters, but she did treat us all equally. There was no favoritism shown. She was a very good mom. If we happened to see someone who was down and out, we needed to treat that person just as well as we would treat the president if he walked by. The main thing about Mom was her faith. I have never seen a person who can meet somebody new and in 5 minutes she's already telling them about the Lord. That is a real gift that she has, and that's because the Lord is the most important thing in her life. She made sure that it was the most important thing in our life too. We were always in Sunday school and church. In fact, she taught Sunday school when she was just a teenager. Before she got married at 17, she was teaching. Dad and her went on a one-night honeymoon to Niagara Falls, and the next morning she got up and went and taught Sunday school, which everybody looked and they thought, well, how weird, but it wasn't weird to Mom. That was her responsibility, and she was going to do it. She loved her Sunday school classes. At Bethel, she taught 2nd grade forever, and then taught some older kids later on because that's where she was needed. Mom took her kids from Covenant all the way out to the suburbs where we finally moved to Lincoln Park on a picnic. Now, can you imagine one person taking, there must have been a group of about 15 kids. That was dedication.
It was like somebody holding you. It's like when my second husband used to take me by the hand. It felt almost like God taking you by the hand to lead. When Bill was working midnight, I was sitting reading in bed, and I waited for him, and he came home, and he was sitting reading beside me, and I fell asleep. And all of a sudden, in my sleep, I sat right up, right in the corner. I could see it so plain. Was this bright light with Christ with his hands out like that. And it had such a peaceful feeling that it was just wonderful. This baby sits up very well. Yes, you do.
There was a picture of Bill sitting up when he was her age.
Yeah.
He must have been sitting up real early.
Well, when Bill sat up at this age, he was sitting over about 3 stomachs. I fed him too much. Every time he cried, he had colic. And every time he cried, my husband would put his feet in the back of my back and push me out of bed. He wouldn't let me sleep. I said, let him cry. I was so tired that first year. Aren't you still tired, Marla?
For what? What?
From childbirth?
I'm tired.
Oh, I was tired for that first year.
Yeah, I haven't bounced back yet.
Well, and Uncle Bill couldn't stand it. And every time the baby would cry, he's hungry. And actually, he wasn't hungry, he had gas. And to feed him was the worst thing. We overfed him. And when I took him to the clinic, he said to him, you've overfed this baby. I said, I only give him what he eats. Well, he said he's eating too much. Poor Bill, it's a wonder he ever lived. I did everything. My mother-in-law she gave me a lot of advice. She said, give him senna tea, so I'd give him senna tea. And my mother said, rub paregoric on their gums. I'd rub paregoric on. My poor Billy got experimented on.
Yeah, good idea.
Well, first one always gets
Did you give me that blanket?
some experiment.
He survived it all right, though. Norm and Bill and their pals used to have Friday night popcorn and games at the house. But I wanted Sandy to marry Bill because she helped him with his paper route. But Bill said he didn't like her. He slaved her over. But Bill took his responsibility of the kids. You know, if we went away when they got older, Norman waited until then, and then he did everything he wasn't supposed to do. But Bill took responsibility. He's a nervous juror still today about any responsibility. Mom told me about one time when she left me in the care of my oldest brother, Bill. And let's see, if I was a baby, he would have been about 10 years old, which probably now that would have been child abuse or neglect or something. But she figured he was old enough, and she was only going to be gone a short while and a short distance from home. Well, when she got home, he was so happy to see her. He said she cried the whole time. I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. Nothing would make her stop crying. My mom just lifted me out of the sun and I stopped crying. I guess he didn't know, even in those days, I didn't like the sun. Um, and Mr. Pemsel knew every move we made, and he told us about it because he didn't want the kids to walk on his. You know how they'll cut the corner of the coming down the
grass,
sidewalk
yeah.
and walk over the corner of your grass. Well, we had bushes there, but they still cut over the corner a little bit. And he said, Mrs. Cook, don't let the children go over that. So then we put up a rope so that they wouldn't do it, because you can't tell boys not to do something. If you tell them not to do it, then they do it all the more. But they liked Mr. Pemsel. He was a gardener, but they had, everything was meticulous. They were older people, and we didn't want to. When they saw that family with 5 kids move in, and Mr. Slough and Mrs. Slough on the other side, they were a older couple too. But she had sugar diabetes, and she had problems with her head. So she didn't mind. She used to stroll up and down the backyard, you know, the alleyway, and look and see what we were doing all the time, or talk to our cat.
You had a cat?
Yeah, we had a white Fluffy. And she'd say, "Come on, Fluffala." But all the kids in the neighborhood came in our backyard. We never had grass because they all came back there to play. Their parents wouldn't let them. That was some kind of an Indian celebration. That's my little Eddie. That's the back of our house on Edgewood. Built that shed the first year we lived there. We lived there 34 years. And he said, "I'll finish it off." And he never finished it off. And every time I said something about it, he said, "Now don't nag me." No, don't push them. Their father said, "Next time that window breaks, you're not just paying for it, you're going to put it in." And Bill was good with Eddie, but he would not let him get away with the things his mother did. Because Faith spoiled him, she really did. I had 4 babies home, 4 preschool children. That was when I had little Eddie, my nephew. Yeah, Eddie lived with us. Nancy, Eddie, and Jeannie, and Tom. That was some days. Preschool kids.
Yeah, 4 of them.
They got along all right when Eddie's mother was working. Yes, they did. They loved each other, and I treated them like they were mine. You know, Eddie was my kid too, and they got along just fine. But when Faith came home, oh, she did everything to Eddie, and Eddie took the little coffee pot and hit Nancy right on the nose with it.
Oh, yeah?
I said, "Faith, you know, these kids get along fine when you're not here," but when she would give Eddie gum, and you know, you can't do that with little kids. Give one,
Yeah.
and not the others. And she'd get special things or let Eddie play with her button box, and the other kids couldn't touch it. Well, I said, "No, we don't treat each other like that. No, Eddie was just like one of the family, only he didn't get the spankings."
Mom sometimes would get frustrated with her children, and she'd say, "I'm going to call Father Baker's," which is the orphanage. We were never afraid because we knew every time she'd walk over to the phone and pretend to call Father Baker's, it was, "Hello, Faith? Hello, Helen? Hello, Jean?" So that threat didn't hold much water with us, didn't get us to behave any better. One more thing that I can remember about Mom is she didn't like musicals too much. She said, "How ridiculous. Nobody breaks into song in the middle of life." And I would have to bite my lips to keep from laughing because she did it all the time. She was always reminded of a song that most of the time, I guess it was her mother who had taught the songs, had sung them, and then she learned them. But I wish that I had recorded her singing some of those years ago, because now she says, oh, I can't do that. My voice is all crackly and old. I can't do that. But it would be fun because I can't remember all the words to those songs. Now, if she had said, nobody breaks out into a choreographed dance routine, that I could agree with her on. But the breaking out into song, I find myself doing it. If a certain phrase is mentioned, out comes the song. And it was just that same way with Mom.
There's Nancy and Jean and my sister Miriam. Oh, Miriam was the best aunt. They all loved her. She was good to all the kids. She had that one Tommy that he was 2 years old when he died.
So what did he die of?
Pneumonia. He went to the hospital and they gave him too strong a medicine and they killed him. Diane was the tiny one, and she was the Miss Boss. She was the oldest one of the great kids, and she used to boss them and tell them what to do.
So Aunt Nancy wasn't bossy there?
Oh, Aunt Nancy never been boss.
It's Pat.
It's Pat, yeah. I looked a little too fat for Diane. Diane was petite. That's why Pat's like Nancy and Diane is like Jean. They switched around though. Yeah, those girls got along real good.
And the buggy we got for the other kids were, when Aunt Marion lost her little boy, she gave all the baby stuff to my mother. One time I had Edwin and Helen both in the buggy. I had my own children, I had 2s and 3s in the buggy. I'd put 2 in the buggy and 1 on the end, the 3 youngest kids. Nancy was so heavy she'd weigh that buggy right down to the ground, sitting on the end, you know. But it was going up a mile to the store, you know, up the hill, and she couldn't trek up that far. She was just a little girl. And Tom and Jean were too young to walk that far, too. Those 3 were real close. See, they were together. Yeah. That was like a younger family because the 2 older boys were off and in school.
Yeah, Annie Feldman was my best friend all through life. And he was born shortly after my first boy, Phil, was born. So they were good friends. But we soon broke up because the fathers didn't get... Bill helped them do a lot of work, but Bernard he expected him to do it free, and Bill thought he was cheap, so...
Norm is another story. When Mom would let him watch us, which he was a lot older before she would let him watch us, he would have the most bizarre punishments. He once told us that we were going to have to eat his toenail clippings if we didn't behave. If we even twiddled our thumb, we were going to go to the basement and stand on one tile of the floor until he came and got us. Now, to him, that would have been an extreme punishment because he was so afraid of spiders. I wasn't afraid of them, so going down the basement was no big thing to me. So if a spider was there, spider was there. But I could go on and on about Norm because I was the one following him, even though it was 7 years later. Teachers, when I would go into school the first day, would say, "You're not Norman Cook's sister, are you?" Yeah, I got that a lot. But somehow I made it through school, even though I was Norman Cook's sister. And to be fair, he has turned out to be a wonderful man, very good father and good husband, someone who really loves the Lord. So all the disciplining that Mom had to do to Norm really paid off.
Did she go to Bethel there too?
Oh, yes. she sang in the choir, the junior choir. And when she was a little girl, we used to walk to Sunday school behind them down Englewood. We lived a block further down, but we'd get them going to Sunday school at the same time. And Norman would say, imagine a little girl like that wearing silk stockings, and her stockings would roll around her legs because they were skinny little legs, you know. Then he ended up marrying her. I heard she's got that big hoop on. She had to have an operation the next day.
After her wedding?
She had cancer, and she said, well, do you want to let me out of marriage to Norman? He said, no, I loved you before and I love you with the cancer too. He said, I'll take the chance. But the doctor wouldn't let her go on their honeymoon. He said she has to go in. She was married on a Saturday, and on Monday they went in and took one of her ovaries out. They left one in and something else. And he said, you may not have children. But she did. She had Lynn and Mark. And then she had another boy in between Lynn and Mark, but she lost Danny. She was a little spitfire. Mrs. Hurst and I used to go visiting people from the church, and there's his old drinking partner, Ray Hurst. There they are going away. Mr. Hurst used to keep the watch on them, though. They'd come home and neck in the car, and he'd put the light off and on out there so that meant she should come in. And then she took Nancy. Nancy was out as a little girl. She must have been about 4 years old. She was wheeling her doll buggy up and down the sidewalk, and Mrs. Slough said, come on in, Nancy, I got something for you. And she went in her house and she told Nancy to do the dishes. Well, Nancy was too little. She didn't know how to do the dishes. So she did a lot of goofing, you know. And Nancy was an obedient little girl, but she didn't know how to do dishes. I didn't let her do the dishes yet. And Mrs. Slough got mad at her because she put water all over it. And when she told me about it, I said, oh, Mrs. Slough, she's too little. She can't do dishes yet. She's not going to school even. She thought, well, this is a little girl, I'll put her to work.
That's a watering can.
Oh, she'd pick anything up in the yard. She was a doll in one hand or a teddy or something. Nancy was great at picking things up and depositing them someplace else. Oh, there they are. Nancy always would want to get in the playpen with Jean. But wherever Jeannie was, Nancy was there, and she had it parked right in the middle of it too, and she took up a lot of the space. Jeannie would just look at her with that look of, you gotta get in here too. Oh yeah, you could make the car go with a pump.
Ah, so it was like a bike.
Nancy always could do anything. She'd have been a boy.
She watch out for her younger sister.
She was very good with her. She wasn't the least bit jealous, nothing. She was good with Jeannie. A little bit she was too young to be responsible because she'd hug her around the neck or something like that. Jean just loves that middle picture there because that's what we got a picture of Nancy doing that to her.
Now I have to say, one time I didn't think she was so good. We were on a ride called the Wild Mouse at Crystal Beach. And it was one of those rides where there was a little car just big enough for two people to sit, one behind the other with no partition in between. The wheels were in the middle of the car, and the track had lots of curvy loops way up high. Well, we went around one, and obviously I was coming down on the fat part of her thigh, and she started pushing me to get me off. And I said, Mom, you're going to push me right out of the car, because it looked like you were going right off the edge with the wheels being in the middle. But that did not persuade her to stop pushing. She kept pushing, and I thought I'm going to die. But we finally made it to the end of the ride, and we had a good laugh about it later. I don't remember Covenant Presbyterian at all. I was 6 years old when we started going to Bethel. Before that, Mom took all 5 of us all the way across town on the streetcar to go to Sunday school and church. And the only thing that I can really remember about that church is that the bus stop that we waited to get back on the streetcar was right in front of Freddy's Donuts. And every once in a while, they must have been open on Sunday, because we would get day-old donuts there. Not a very good advertisement for the church that I couldn't remember anything about them, but I could remember Freddy's Donuts.
She was a darling baby. She wouldn't love you. Nancy was the smoocher. Ah. And now Nancy don't want Gina's the smoocher. She'd say, now that's for January. Now only one kiss 'em. And Gina'd say, oh, well, I'll be ahead a few months. And she'd give her another kiss. Boys were real good with the girls. This is Gina on her first birthday.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that day so well. I had a birthday party for Jeannie, and Aunt Jean came over, and the kids came over, and Bill didn't get out of bed. And then they'd dress up in anything to do a parade. Very simple things that got along good. They had a good time on nothing. She's a little petite thing. Everybody loved Jean. They wanted, like something that's cute and tiny like that. But all I can remember, she was so fussy with her food.
Yeah, Autumn was never fussy with her food. Not as a baby.
None of my kids were, but Jean. Jean she didn't like this and she didn't like that. Your mother ruled Nancy and Tom. She had a will of her own. But she must take after me because I wouldn't let her get away with it. She would say something and I'd say, up to your room. And she'd stamp up them steps. I said, come down here and walk up the steps, don't stand. She'd come down and she'd get to about the second step from the top and stamp again. I said, get down. Well, your mother went through torture because when it's fighting fire with fire. Nancy Baird lived up the street. She was Jean's friend. And Jean used to take such advantage of her. Her Autumn reminds me so much of Jean. Wait till I talk to Jean. She'll be happy to hear that.
My sister Jean. We used to laugh because we would find her initials, J. C. everywhere. There was a little tiny figurine with a hole in the bottom because it was ceramic, and she had taken a pencil and written in there J. C. like everything belonged to her. Jean was so double jointed she could jump rope with her arms. But she used to love to take a hairbrush in both hands and whirl her arms around like a windmill and come chasing after me to hear me scream and run away from her.
Tom was a little chubster too.
Tom was a very good baby. He was like your baby. He used to lay on the bed like that, and on Wednesday, all the girls would come over to the house,
Oh yeah?
and I've had lunch. And
He would just lay there?
He'd lay there when I changed him, but he'd sit in the high chair while we were out in the kitchen eating. And when I put him down on the bed after the girls went and changed him, and he'd go, it sounded just like he was trying to say all the things he heard us say at the table. I said to Marion, he's listened to everything and now he's repeating it.
Marilyn Fisher.
Oh, I thought so. That was Tom's girlfriend. They were born close to each other. Oh, there's...
Now, was that your friend's daughter?
They were Irene's, that was her, Irene Fisher's baby, and my baby, and we took them to clinic together. They were two fatties.
And Tom, Mom still tells this story about when he was a teenager, he used to call her OL for old lady. And she said, that's fine to call me that around the house because I know that you're saying it lovingly. But when we're at church, I don't want you to say it because somebody might think that's disrespectful. Well, he did it once too often. And she said, all right, baby dumplings, in front of his friends. And he never called her OL in front of her, the church people again. Tom had a little teddy bear that Bill had given to him, well, actually loaned to him. And the poor teddy bear's fur was all rubbed off. And we used to have parties with our dolls and with Tom's teddy bear. And one time we were talking about what the dolls would wear for Halloween. And Jean said, I think Tom's teddy will be a garbage man. And that hurt his feelings so bad he started to cry and he left the party. So I was always the tender-hearted one and went after him and said, now she really didn't mean that. That was a joke. And your Teddy is, you could have him be Superman or something like that. But he was very tender-hearted. I can remember one time when Norm was babysitting us again, and he said, Nancy, let's fool Tom. He said, go in there and flush the toilet. I thought, what's he want me to do that for? And I went in, flushed the toilet, and Norm was hiding. And he said, now say to him, oh no, I flushed Norm down the toilet. And Tom, of course, started crying again. And then Norm pops out. Ha 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 ha. And we still talk about that.
Now, Aunt Helen used to be my baby, but she got mad at me once for something, and she disowned me, and I can't even remember. I don't want to remember what it was. And she called me dumb. And I said, that's all right. A lot of people say it. I know what I am. I used to want to be a real intelligent person, but now I know the Lord made me like I am because He wants me that way. I always admired intelligent people. I worked my brain off to get to be the best. I could see where Nancy and Jean got that from in school. Well, they succeeded better than I did. Then when I took that high school examination to get my diploma, I got the best score in spelling because I had memorized all the words that they were going to have. The math, they gave us math that I never heard of, that I didn't have it. I went as far as the third year. But you don't have to take, I loved business math. I could take a column of figures and go up and like everything to add them together. And they lasted 2 days.
2 days of testing?
Oh, I had such a headache. My friend Annie Bonanni, she went with me too because she didn't finish high school. She got married before she finished too, like I did. And she went to the exam with me at that school, and she kept saying, she sat behind me. Oh my gosh, and she went to a Catholic school where they really taught them a lot. It was multiple choice, and that is hard when they get them so close together,
You know the right answer.
Well, you can't get the right answer. The trigonometry, I never had it. I didn't know how to do it. I used to have to go, eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Now, the words I knew because, see, I had memorized them. Then they'd give you this paragraph and say, what did that pertain to, this or that or the other? It could have pertained to all of them.
Mom was always one that put down herself as, she didn't think of herself as intelligent. If someone would compliment one of us kids, she'd say, oh, they got their intelligence from their father, which I know wasn't true. She had to be in her 40s when she went back to get her GED. Now, Dad didn't have his high school diploma. That was a common thing in those days. But Mom thought that that was what she should do. Well, she studied and studied, especially the spelling part, because that was her downfall. However, on the test, she did pretty well in the spelling, even better than she did in some of the other sections of the test. Some of the kids that go through high school, they wouldn't be able to pass that test, but she did, and was very proud that she had her high school diploma. Now about the spelling. That always caused a lot of smiles and laughter. One time when I was in college, she wrote about an incident that had happened to her that week. Somehow a half-gallon of milk got spilled on the carpet in the front of the car. And then, of course, she had to clean it up, because if there was even a speck of that milk left in there, it would have soured and stunk up the whole car. So she ended the story by saying, "Once again, I learned that life is not a bowl of cherries," except that she spelled bowl, B-O-W-E-L. And that changed the meaning quite extensively. Well, I still laugh about it when I think about it, but I have always told her Einstein was a poor speller, and he almost flunked out of grade school because he wouldn't pay attention, and he just could not spell. So she didn't need to feel bad. It's something that either you have it or you don't. It sort of went along with how Mom murders the English language. I remember one time she asked me how many F's are in a void, because she says it a void instead of a void. So naturally it sounded like an F. But if that's her worst fault, she's got it going for her.